Afghanistan is in crisis, and this time it's not war that's bringing death and destruction. A powerful 6.0 magnitude earthquake has ripped through eastern Afghanistan, and the numbers are staggering. Over 1,400 people are confirmed dead, more than 3,000 injured, and thousands more remain buried beneath collapsed buildings. This isn't just another natural disaster, it's a catastrophe unfolding in one of the world's most vulnerable nations. The earthquake struck at a.m. local time on Sunday, with its epicenter located just 27 kilometers northeast of Jalalabad, a city of 200,000 people in Nangarhar province. But here's what makes this earthquake particularly devastating. It hit at a shallow depth of only 8 kilometers below the surface. Shallow earthquakes are killers. The closer the epicenter is to the surface, the more destructive the seismic waves become when they reach populated areas. The provinces of Kunar and Nangarhar bore the brunt of the destruction. In these mountainous regions, entire villages were wiped off the map. 3 villages were completely razed. Their mud and stone houses, the traditional building materials in rural Afghanistan, offering no protection against the violent shaking that would soon tear their world apart.
A major earthquake has hit eastern Afghanistan, with the Taliban government's interior ministry saying at least 600 people have been killed. The magnitude 6.0 quake struck along the border of the provinces of Nangarhar and Kunar on Sunday night. The epicenter is in a remote mountainous area, making relief operations extremely difficult. Some of the injured have been helicoptered to safety. Roads to the worst hit area are said to have been blocked by landslides. Officials say entire villages have been destroyed.
The earthquake struck when families were asleep in their homes, turning what should have been a place of safety into death traps. The underdeveloped area's homes, made of wood, bricks, and rubble, were simply not built to withstand such earthquakes. When these structures collapse, the heavy roofs fall directly onto the occupants, often with fatal results. Rescue operations are underway, but they're facing enormous challenges. The mountainous terrain that defines eastern Afghanistan has become a nightmare for emergency responders. Roads that were already in poor condition before the earthquake are now blocked by landslides and rockfalls. Heavy rains following the earthquake have made the situation even worse, triggering additional landslides and making many affected areas completely inaccessible. On the ground in Kabul, humanitarian workers are describing experiencing the earthquake firsthand and providing crucial details about the disaster's impact. The challenging mountainous terrain, blocked roads due to landslides, and villages completely destroyed with masses feared trapped under rubble have made helicopter rescue operations the only viable option in many areas. Many families remain trapped under rubble, and the areas affected are dealing with thousands of returnees from Pakistan who were trying to rebuild their lives when disaster struck.
The situation is still critical and an emergency. There are still slight tremors from the earthquake. May God grant goodness, but people are in a state of fear. Families have left their homes and gone out into open fields where they have been waiting since last night until now.
As part of the relief operations, Afghan military helicopters brought aid to the affected villages in the Kunar province and transported injured ones to a nearby hospital. In response to the devastating earthquake in Afghanistan, India has extended humanitarian assistance to the affected country. India's Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal shared images on social media of trucks loaded with sacks of rice and other essential food items being dispatched to Afghanistan. Additionally, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar spoke with Afghan Foreign Minister Maulvi.
Desperate scenes are playing out across the region. Videos show men digging through rubble with nothing but their bare hands and shovels, searching for survivors. Military helicopters are conducting evacuation flights, with at least 40 flights already completed to transport 420 casualties to hospitals. Taliban security personnel and local volunteers are working around the clock, but the scale of the disaster is overwhelming their limited resources. The human cost is heartbreaking. At Nangarhar Regional Hospital, injured children are being treated without their parents or relatives, many of whom are presumed dead or still trapped under debris. Dr. Sharafat Zaman Amar, a spokesperson for the Ministry of Health, described the scenes as painful and unbearable moments. Afghan volunteers have been donating blood to help treat the thousands of injured victims flooding into hospitals. The testimony of survivors reveals that families have fled their homes to wait in open fields since the night of
So, and often when we report on earthquakes around the world, we know that time really is of the essence here, trying to reach those people who are trapped under the rubble. The reality is at the moment in this area in Afghanistan, it's going to be very difficult on many fronts, not least that access. It's difficult at the best of times to get to this mountainous area. The roads are very narrow. They're often just dirt tracks. And at the moment, the only option they have is using helicopters. You can see these images from Jalalabad. These are helicopters that have been out to the area, landing, and locals helping Taliban soldiers take those injured on stretchers to hospitals. We're also hearing that Jalalabad Hospital, the main hospital, is completely overrun now, very busy trying to help those who have been rescued. But I think the nature of this terrain, people often build their homes one on top of the other, and they're likely to have toppled one onto the other during this quake. And because it happened just before midnight, many people will have been asleep inside their homes. It is just worth remembering as well, Angie, that since the Taliban retook control of Afghanistan back in August 2021, a lot of international aid has been cut off from the country. The UN says it does have teams in Afghanistan and they are delivering emergency assistance and life-saving support. But the Taliban government is now calling for international assistance as well. It's also warning that those numbers of injured and dead are likely to rise.
Yeah, we'll indeed watch for that. We know that India is looking to respond on this, as some other countries are as well. Anna, thank you so much for this. Anna Cunningham for us in London.
the earthquake, providing a human perspective on the disaster's ongoing impact. But this earthquake isn't happening in isolation. Afghanistan is already facing one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. The country has been under Taliban control since 2021, following the chaotic U.S. withdrawal. International aid, which once sustained millions of Afghans, has been dramatically cut. The Trump administration halted more than $1.7 billion worth of American aid contracts earlier this year, and the United Kingdom, France, and Germany quickly followed suit. The timing couldn't be worse. Afghanistan is experiencing its fourth consecutive year of drought. Over 2.3 million Afghans have been forced to return from Iran and Pakistan this year, adding to the country's economic pressures. Food insecurity is reaching crisis levels. By October 2025, over 9.5 million Afghans, representing 21% of the population, are expected to face crisis-level food shortages. The earthquake has exposed just how vulnerable Afghanistan has become. The mountainous terrain with narrow dirt roads, recent flash flooding, and landslides are making access extremely difficult, with helicopters being the only option for many locations. The Taliban government is now calling for international assistance, while warning that casualty numbers will likely rise as rescue teams reach more remote areas.
Thank you, Terry. At the moment, the information are still incoming. It's still early days, so it's hard to yet know the impact of these earthquakes. But since last night, we're trying to collect information. Our team are deployed in the east. What we know is that the most impacted areas are in Kunar and Nangarhar. We know that some of the villages that are quite remote are still inaccessible, while the number of deaths thus far that we have received is around 800 killed. We expect the number to increase as many families remain to be under rubbles. It's important as well to mention that many of these locations are really hard to access at the moment. The authorities, forces are trying to clear the roads, so assistance will be impacted as the roads needs to be cleared.
How well prepared is the Taliban government to respond to a disaster like this?
There are some deployments at the moment. We know there is some clearances of roads undertaken and some evacuation, but there is a lot that is needed, a lot of assistance that is needed at the moment. Our team and others are deployed, are doing assessment and try to collect information and try to provide immediate response as much as possible. But let me also mention that this area is impacted as well by the forced return from Pakistan. Actually in Kunar and in Nangarhar, it's one of the high return areas where many have been forced to return. They have returned to these areas trying to rebuild their lives, and they are now impacted by this earthquake. The assistance that is required at the moment is certainly medical evacuation, it's clearance of the rubbles, emergency healthcare assistance, shelter, food, everything is needed at the moment.
Afghanistan, since the Taliban took over there, has been isolated internationally to some degree. Is the Taliban government willing to ask other countries for help in this situation?
We, as humanitarian organizations, of course, our work is to provide humanitarian assistance to the most impacted areas and families. We have been impacted by the budget cuts, especially recently since the US budget cuts, but then also the reduction is funding overall. The capacity to respond has been weakened since the beginning of this year. We are deployed along with other organizations and the UN organization to respond, but certainly more is needed urgently at the moment.
Dania, thank you very much for talking with us today. That was Dania Al-Sharif with the Danish Refugee Council in Kabul.
Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid posted on social media that local officials and residents are currently engaged in rescue efforts, but he also revealed a troubling reality. So far, no foreign governments have reached out to provide support for rescue or relief work. This isolation is having deadly consequences. The international response has been limited but is slowly materializing. Afghan military helicopters are delivering aid and evacuating injured victims. India has sent humanitarian assistance with trucks of rice and essential supplies, along with 1,000 tents and 15 tons of food supplies. There has been diplomatic engagement between Indian and Afghan foreign ministers, and the UN has allocated $5 million in emergency funding. The European Union pledged 130 tons of emergency supplies and €1 million for relief efforts. The United Kingdom committed £1 million, and Iran offered medical and humanitarian aid. But these contributions pale in comparison to the scale of the crisis. This clip from Mazar Dara village shows almost the entire village collapsed with children, elderly, and young people trapped under rubble. As rescue workers describe the emergency response efforts,
to burden resources of the country reeling under aid cuts.
The earthquake struck around 12 a.m. We moved to the area at 1 a.m. We were in contact with other departments. Since the road was bad, we reached the earthquake-struck area early in the morning on foot and started treating the injured.
The humanitarian loss drew reactions from around the world. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi extended his condolences over the huge loss of lives as India sent food and other aid supplies in this hour of grief. Questions also surfacing on how a shallow earthquake with this magnitude and a depth of only 8 kilometers managed to cause such extensive damage. Shallower earthquakes tend to cause more damage and are often followed by a series of aftershocks. At least 5 in this case, which continued throughout the night. Afghanistan is not new to deadly earthquakes. In October 2023, an earthquake in Afghanistan's western province of Herat killed at least 2,400 people. As per the Taliban administration, in September 2022, meanwhile, at least 8 people were killed after tremors hit Kunar province. Major earthquakes also caused a great deal of damage in the months of January and June the same year. And the latest one has reignited fears of broader risks in the region as well as in the neighboring countries. In fact, countries like Pakistan, Nepal, sharing tectonic zones with Afghanistan, all of which are located.
What makes this disaster particularly tragic is Afghanistan's history with earthquakes. The country sits in a seismically active region where the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates meet beneath the Hindu Kush Mountains. Since 1950, 71 earthquakes of magnitude 6 or larger have struck within 250 kilometers of this latest quake's epicenter. Afghanistan has suffered repeatedly from deadly seismic events in recent years. In June 2022, a 5.9 magnitude earthquake killed around 1,000 people. In October 2023, three 6.3 magnitude earthquakes hit western Afghanistan's Herat province, with the Taliban claiming 4,000 deaths, though the United Nations put the toll at 1,500. Each time, the country's limited infrastructure and resources have been overwhelmed. The current earthquake's impact is being magnified by Afghanistan's poor construction standards and the critical lack of resources following international aid cuts. U.S. funding cuts have severely impacted Afghanistan's ability to respond to the earthquake. 50% of humanitarian response was previously funded by the U.S., and now with 23 million people in need, the lack of resources has exacerbated an already desperate situation. Organizations have medicines and supplies, but face bureaucratic obstacles in distribution that are costing precious time.
Organizations and humanitarians like us who are on the ground, who have the needed medicines and supplies, but cannot distribute them.
And you say you're waiting for some kind of a green light from the U.S. administration, and I hear your point that, the response so far, that you're grateful for what it is, but how has all that changed as well under the Taliban and the fact that it is the Taliban right now that is in charge of this response effort?
Well, the reality is that the de facto authorities have been bringing everybody together today to ensure that whatever resources are available are dedicated to the response, the earthquake response. So there have been meetings that have been held, coordination meetings held today. One will be held tomorrow at 2 p.m. all in an effort to ensure that those who are responding are doing so with complementarity rather than with any sort of duplication. The resources are clearly stretched. So all the needs that we are hearing about will likely never be met, but we are starting to get a good picture of the extent of the damage. And hopefully those who are able to reach those locations will be doing so as early as tomorrow morning. I mean, many have already arrived today, but I believe that the vast majority of the response will start tomorrow.
We're trying to get a measure of how the response may have changed here. I mean, the last time we saw an earthquake of this magnitude was in October 2023. More than 2,000 people died. All of this predated, in fact, the closure of U.S. aid and all of those funding cuts on the part of the U.S. administration. Following the earthquake, how fundamental do you believe these changes are to the response effort and what that effort will look like for the people that desperately need it yesterday, not today?
Well, I think the major change is that the scale will probably be larger. Just today, we've seen a figure from the UN of 800 deaths, 12,000 or so people directly and heavily impacted by this. But the resources are nowhere near what was available at the time of the Herat earthquake that you are referring to. So I believe that what has really changed is our ability to respond.
The United Nations estimates that nearly 500,000 people likely felt strong to very strong shaking from Sunday's earthquake. Rescue efforts are now truly a race against time. United Nations resident coordinator Indrika Ratwata warned that casualty numbers could rise exponentially. These are life and death decisions while we race against time to reach people, he said at a briefing in Kabul. The Taliban government has deployed dozens of commandos to areas that helicopters cannot reach, but many villages remain completely cut off. The international community faces a moral dilemma. Afghanistan desperately needs help, but providing aid means working with the Taliban government, which only Russia recognizes. The Taliban's restrictive policies toward women and girls, including bans on education and employment, have created additional barriers to international assistance. Many aid organizations have been forced to scale back operations due to these restrictions. Tuesday brought even more bad news. A second earthquake, measuring 5.2 magnitude, struck the region about 20 miles northeast of Jalalabad. While smaller than Sunday's quake, it has created additional fear and potential damage in an area already devastated by the initial disaster. The timing of this aftershock during ongoing rescue operations has complicated efforts to reach survivors. The economic implications are severe. Shah Mahmood, a Taliban official in Nangarhar province, reported that the earthquake destroyed approximately 8,000 houses. For a country already struggling economically, the cost of rebuilding will be enormous. Many families have lost not just their homes but their livelihoods, as agricultural areas have been damaged and livestock killed. What we're witnessing in Afghanistan is a perfect storm of natural disaster meeting human-made vulnerability. The earthquake itself was a natural phenomenon, but its devastating impact has been amplified by decades of conflict, poor infrastructure, international isolation, and economic collapse. The result is a humanitarian catastrophe that could have been less severe under different circumstances. The international community's response will be a test of humanitarian principles versus political considerations. Afghanistan's people are paying the price for their government's policies and the world's complicated relationship with the Taliban. Children are dying in hospitals without their parents. Families are trapped under rubble with no one coming to help. Villages are completely cut off from the outside world. This earthquake serves as a stark reminder of how natural disasters don't discriminate based on politics or ideology. They strike the most vulnerable hardest, and in Afghanistan's case, that vulnerability has been deepened by years of international isolation and domestic instability. The question now is whether the international community will prioritize saving lives over political considerations. As rescue operations continue, every hour matters. The 72-hour window that experts consider critical for finding survivors trapped under debris is rapidly closing. For the thousands of families still waiting for news of their loved ones, time is running out. The world is watching to see if Afghanistan's people will receive the help they desperately need, or if they'll be left to face this disaster alone. The earthquake in Afghanistan isn't just a story about tectonic plates shifting beneath the earth. It's a story about human resilience in the face of overwhelming tragedy, about the consequences of international isolation, and about the urgent need for humanitarian action regardless of political complications. The final death toll may never be fully known, but what's certain is that Afghanistan's people are facing one of their darkest hours, and they're facing it largely alone.